Today we're going to be testing out the active dynamic stabilization within the ZV-E1 with the Tamron 35-150, since it does not have any like OSS or vibration compensation, but more in the telephoto range to see how well it works. A lot of the videos that I've seen using the dynamic active stabilization with the ZV-E1 have been more with either lenses that have already some sort of stabilization within it, or a little bit of the wider where it tends to work better because you don't have as many jitters as you would with a telephoto lens. So I kind of want to go out here in my backyard to test out a couple things, to do it at 4K 24 frames per second, and as well as 4K 60, and slowing it down to see how much better it can make your B-roll, since you can't really do it with the 4K 120 from what I've seen, since it only does like standard stabilization, since it's, I guess, for super slow motion. So we're gonna go ahead and give you a little bit of the options to see 3 different methods that I'm gonna do. One of them is just gonna be holding it more steadily, just kind of staying point. One of them is gonna be more doing a panning kind of style. And lastly, I'm gonna be doing where I can do a little bit of walking to see how well it stabilizes as if I was moving to a subject. So my main thing will be to do a little bit on the 50 range and then kind of move up a little bit to try to do a couple different scenarios of what the telephoto side of range would be, since most people tend to have either a, kind of 50 to the 400 kind of style telephoto lenses, a 70 to 200 and things of that sort. So we'll see how well it holds. So first up, we're gonna be using that as our subject just to kind of track it and everything. I'm gonna go first with about 50 millimeters and just doing the 4K 24 frames per second, kind of doing the stationary, the panning, and then a little bit of walking towards it to see how it works. Kind of first seeing it all. Obviously with the walking it's just harder because it's harder to stabilize, especially with a smaller camera with this, but yeah, it is what it is. We're gonna try to do, I'm gonna go to an 85 instead of the 70 range. I'm just gonna do more the 85 telephoto range, kind of go from there and then just go all the way to the 150 just for the sake of time, so that you guys can just see a little bit more in a bit the 4K 60 faster instead of having to do, too much going through it. And now time to do the 150. So that is a 4K 24 frames per second style of dynamic active stabilization within the ZV-E1 with the 35-150. So one of the main things that I already noticed from the start with the 4K 24 frames per second, especially on the more telephoto range of part of this lens, is that it does get jittery just from looking within the camera itself. So it's hard to kind of stabilize those kind of footages. I would assume that it would work better with a lens that has like OSS or vibration compensation to be able to get a better, stable footage on the telephoto side of things. Because at the end, I also do a little bit of the extra stabilization and everything with the 20-40 by Tamron, just to show you what it can do with the stabilization within it. See if it's a lot better whenever it's a wider range of focal range rather than, the more telephoto side of things. So it's time to do the 4K 60. We're gonna be doing 50, 85, and 150 as well. I'm gonna be using that still to be able to give you a bit of a comparison of both of them. That way you kind of get the idea as well. We're gonna be doing the same thing, standing still, panning, and then walking towards it. See if it works anything better, because I'll be able to slow it down. And with the 60 frames per second, it's not as slow as if you do 120 frames per second or anything like that. So it could be a good option for some people. Heck, even using maybe 30 frames per second and then just slowing it out just a smidge could help you out as well, if you're wanting to have just a little bit not as slow of B-roll. See, the main thing for me is not really that you're gonna be so much just following people nonstop with just handheld. I would assume if you know that you're gonna be doing long-term kind of anything, you might want to use it with like a gimbal or something like that, because probably this with a gimbal with the dynamic active stabilization would probably pair up pretty nicely. But let's see how that 4K 60 works. And we're done with that. So we're gonna do the bonus one of the 20 to 40 by Tamron. I'm only gonna do the 20 range and just maybe the 35, just to kind of give you a little bit more of the wider range kind of style, and doing it 4K 24 frames and then 4K 60, just to show you that little bit of what happens with a more wider range rather than the telephoto. So let's see how the image stabilization will work with the dynamic active on a more, kind of wider range. So 20 millimeters is up first. That was the example using the 35 to 150 with the ZV-E1 with the more dynamic range of stabilization within the camera itself. It is a very cool setup to have, but I do have some thoughts when it comes down to how stable the footage actually is. Looking at it within the camera and looking just behind it, it seems like it's just not super stable in a more telephoto range compared to when I did it with the 20 to 40, the Tamron lens, because they both don't have the OSS or vibration compensation or anything like that that could pair up with the stabilization that has like inside this camera. I think the ZV-E1 has a better stabilization than it comes down to using like my Sony a7S III or a7 IV, but to be honest, with this type of lens setup with the, a camera like with this one with the stabilization that it has and no OSS or vibration compensation that this lens has in the telephoto range, might pose a little bit of an issue when it comes down to making sure that you get more stable footage, especially the 4K 24 frames per second. Sadly, with that, you can't slow it down. So using the 4K 60 could be more of your advantage to be able to have a little bit better stabilized footage when it comes down to a more telephoto side of range with this lens. I think you'll be fine if you want to do more of the 4K 120 without having to do the stabilization, because you're slowing it down, so that's your stabilization theoretically, and you can do a little bit of post stabilization if needed be. But personally, I think that with this lens, using the dynamic active stabilization is a little bit harder to still get very good footage in the sense of stability with the 50 and above. because with the 20 to 40, I felt good. I mean, I feel like because maybe the lens size was just smoother and the range obviously being wider, you're able to get better stabilization, since usually that's what you get more stabilized footage with more of the, you know, wider range, because you're not focusing on the micro jitters as much as you would with, you know, a telephoto lens. But all in all, I think that this camera setup is still great. I think it'll be great to do for photo and video if you wanted to use a ZV-E1 like how I have for certain things. I probably wouldn't use this lens so much all the time like how I would with my 20 to 40, or maybe pair it up with like maybe a 28 to 75 by Tamron, things like that. That's a little bit more condensed down than this to maybe manage it better. But it's still really nice to be able to do it whenever I need to, because I usually use it with my A7S III for, you know, B-roll, or my A7 IV for photo and video. But at least you'll know more if the telephoto side of range of things with the, you know, active dynamic stabilization or whatever is good enough for you, if you see it more from the 50 range and above. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to this video. The friend will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.